Hey, Greg here. Did you know that I've created a few walking tours of Bangkok? Using the GPS on your phone, the routes take you through some of my favorite areas of the city, exploring the fascinating neighborhoods and hidden history that give Bangkok its sweet, sweet mojo. Head to voicemap.me and search for Bangkok. On this episode, Ed fills us in on his recent trip to Hong Kong, and we discuss how it measures up to Bangkok.
So if you're curious to hear a complete newbie's take on Hong Kong, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 on a quest to find some comfortable, loose-fitting trousers, perhaps with animal designs of some kind, but has yet to find anything fitting that description.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that, man. Maybe you should invent something.
I should. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Maybe some light material. I think it'd be popular.
Yeah, like a famous Thai animal, like, I don't know, like maybe an elephant or something.
Mongoose. Sure, yeah.
Mongoose.
I don't know. They even have those in Thailand. Who knows?
And I'm Nathan Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 23 years ago, fell in love with wondering about the outcome of various Thai superstitions such as astrology, tarot cards, and the Thai Constitutional Court.
That's funny.
Dude, there's some big cases. There's some big cases coming up. And honestly, it's like, you know, I feel like I want to throw some sticks on the ground to like predict what they're going to say. I mean, who knows what the hell they're going to say?
Right. I'm going to come over to your place one time. You're going to be there in like a little loincloth dancing around, like reading the bones. Little bitch, got a bone through
Honestly,
your nose.
That's how it is. Like I cannot make any sense. As an American lawyer, I have to admit that the Thai Constitutional Court, they're doing their own thing. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, it seems like high courts around the world are in somewhat of a unique position these days. They're all doing their own thing. So.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All righty. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about Greg's marathon viewing session of the Lord of the Rings extended editions with his son, and that's a commitment. Mm-hmm. What my students' favorite movies say about them and Thai youth in general. And a fantastic story about two of our patrons, Pim and Stephanie, who met through the show, our show, became best friends, and are now visiting Thailand planning Pim's wedding to her man, Cullen. We had dinner with them last week, and they brought us each a bottle of maple syrup. So obviously, the highest of high fives to Pim and Stephanie.
I had some of that on my cornflakes the other day. Damn fine maple syrup.
Damn fine, no doubt about it. To learn how to become a patron and get all this good stuff, plus full access to over 700 bonus and regular back episodes, click the support button at the top of our website.
Right. And as always, if you have a comment, a show idea, or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button on the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we will play on the show. Alrighty then. Well, in this episode, we are back in the swing of things after Ed's triumphant return from the fascinating city of Hong Kong. Now, I've been to Hong Kong a few times and find it to be an extremely interesting place. We even have a few listeners there. Shout out to Daniel. I have to be honest, though, I haven't been back in a handful of years, and I'm kind of wondering if the recent expansion of government powers in the city has changed its vibe, its livability, and indeed its enjoyment for tourists. Now, thankfully, Ed, those memories are still fresh in your mind, so we thought it'd be interesting to compare your impressions with that of Bangkok. And this, of course, is a sequel to Season 3, Episode 72, where Ed compared Bangkok to Phnom Penh. So this seems to be somewhat of a tradition for the Bangkok podcast. Yep. So Ed, let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about your trip to Hong Kong. How does it compare to our home city?
Well, the first thing I want to make clear is I'm a complete newbie in Hong Kong. As listeners know, I'm not that big of a traveler. I wish I was. I think traveling is cool, but the truth is I just don't do it that much. Like a lot of times during my holidays, time off, I just want to chill. Like for me, it's a big deal to get down to maybe Jomtien Beach, like
right.
2 hours two hours away. Like if I can get 2 hours outside of Bangkok, I feel like I've accomplished something.
That's a win.
that's an epic. That's like a Lord of the Rings type journey for me. I made it to Jomtien. So I'm not the epic traveler that. I mean, Greg, you're much more of an epic traveler than I am. But you and I have friends who are like insanely epic travelers who've been everywhere.
Right.
I'm not that guy. My second caveat is I was only there for about 2.5 days. I brought 15 students there from a university. It's essentially kind of a field trip, but it wasn't really for a class or anything. It was kind of a free vacation for the kids, kind of maybe a little bonding exercise. And out of the 15 students, I think 3 or 4 of them had been to Hong Kong before. So for most of them, it was their first trip, like it was for me.
Cool.
And I, of course, was familiar with Hong Kong from movies and, TV shows. So there were a lot of things that I went there that I recognized, like, okay, I knew that. But the bottom line is I didn't read much. I just kind of got on the plane and showed up. So I thought it might be cool to share my impressions. So are you ready? Can you handle this?
I'm looking forward to it because we were just chatting a few minutes ago before we started recording. It's easy to sort of get complacent in Bangkok or anywhere really and just sort of sit there. But it's especially potent when you are in a city that you didn't grow up in, like an expat in another city, and you've come to earn enough street cred in that city to understand how things work. And you're like, okay, I've got a handle on Bangkok now. I get it. And then you go to a new place and you're at square one again. You're a total noob and you don't know how anything works. And it can be quite disorienting.
That's a very good point. I just felt like I lost all my game. Like my force powers have been diminished.
That's right.
So I'm going to start out positively because it's going to turn out. I've got a lot of negative things to say about Hong Kong. I'm just trying to keep it real.
Okay.
But I'll start off on a positive foot. It is a ridiculously photogenic city. I mean, just geographically, I kind of knew this already from like all the movies and TV shows. But the islands, having the sea right there, having mountains, to me, it's like a photographer's dream. It's a beautiful. I mean, it's not always beautiful. I mean, there's a lot of the skyscraper thing, but it's just a cool looking city.
I agree, and it's got a real Blade Runner vibe. And the thing about Hong Kong is that you can take photos that look like a futuristic Star Trek planet, and then you can turn around and take photos that look like a 1950s Shaw Brothers slum.
That's right. It's like a Chinese market or something. I mean, it really, and I love taking pictures in Bangkok, and I know more places to take pictures in Bangkok because I know Bangkok so much better. But Hong Kong's the first city that I've been to where I was like, oh shit, like this might be. I mean, so I wasn't there long enough to really explore the nooks and crannies, but I was there long enough to realize there's a shitload of nooks and crannies in Hong Kong.
Oh man, yeah, it's
just I didn't have time to explore them, and I think it's the first city I've been to where I was thinking like, okay, this is more of a photographer's dream than Bangkok is, and I love taking pictures in Bangkok. You got to give Hong Kong the edge. It's just the geography. It's like such a huge advantage. It's so cool to be right there. You and I have talked a lot about how we think Bangkok does not take advantage of the river enough.
Right.
But Hong Kong does take advantage of all the water they have. Like all the, you basically can feel like you're at the sea, and then you look across and there's more tall buildings over there, and it's just cool. And like water is just part of the city, like massive bodies of water with a legitimate beach, like basically right in the middle of the city. I mean, it's not gigantically huge, but like a legitimate proper sand beach is like literally like right in the middle of the city, which is something Bangkok doesn't have.
They've really nailed their water transportation too, right? The ferries, what do they call the star ferries or something?
And then of course it's mountainous. So I mean, you made the point to me earlier, before the show started that it has some relationship to like Vancouver,
right?
It's got mountains and sea right there.
Yeah, I've said it's sort of a cross between the best parts of Bangkok and the best parts of Vancouver. It's a financial center. It's on the ocean. It's got a lot of really cool geography, mountains in the background, but it's also got that funky Asian vibe that you find in Bangkok and the street markets and that energy. So I think it's an incredibly cool city when I was there, and the last time I was there was probably 10 years ago. So lots has changed. But I just remember thinking like, oh, they've got the double decker buses, the trams, the boats, the subways
That's
are
right.
incredible. They've got the octopus card that ties it all together, you know, like the single card you can use on a bus, a tram, a boat,
I
whatever.
I was on a tour half the time, so I didn't have to use a card or anything. But that sounds cool. We've often talked about how Bangkok needs that for sure.
God, I mean, every other country in the world, or every other city in the world has figured it out. But yeah, I thought it was a really cool city. And I like a lot of ex-colonial cities. A lot of people speak English, so it's easy to get around. Did you
That's
talk a
right.
lot
That's right.
to any like locals or?
Well, I haven't exhausted the positive things I have to say, but that was my main positive thing is that it's just kind of a cool city. It's kind of a cool city and a great place to take pictures, geographically awesome. But then there were a lot of other things that I just did not like compared to Bangkok. Number one thing I didn't like is the local people never freaking smile. Like even customer service staff,
Oh,
they are like a serious faced culture. And it became a little bit of a joke. I had two different tour guides, both local Hong Kongers, and they had personality, and of course they smiled. But I was teasing them about how like Hong Kong people don't smile, and they were like, no, 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 we don't smile. And then every place, we went on the tour, we'd interact with customer service people, and I'd be like, you see, they're not smiling, and the tour guide would like laugh. And like I'm not joking. After 2.5 days, zero customer service people smiled like when greeting me. Zero. It
really?
wasn't until the very last thing I did, which is like the cable car up to like the Long Ping temple with like the giant Buddha. Finally, we went to a restaurant and like the girl standing there like had a big smile on her face, and I was like, "Oh my God, you're smiling!" Like
It's because she knew you were leaving. I
yeah,
see it.
she's like, oh yeah, your last hour in Hong Kong, and
Yeah,
whatever. Okay, it is what it is. I found the service professional. It wasn't like the service was bad, but man, I missed the Thai smile. Like I got to say that, and it was something
interesting.
that I picked. It was something that I picked up on right away because when we walked into the hotel, I got 15 kids with me. There's a tour guide there, and there's some prearranged things. But it's like a big deal. We're showing up. We just got off the plane. We've got bags. We're like a big group, and we're arriving, and I'm first in line, and I said to the woman, they're sitting there, and I'm like, hi, how are you? Just a basic friendly greeting, and she like with a totally like disinterested look on her face, she goes, yeah. Like, she was basically saying like, yeah, I get it. Okay, I get it. You're being friendly, but like what, like, who are you? Like, where's your passport?
Welcome,
She's like,
welcome to me trying to flirt in high school. Yeah.
she's like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Can we get on with this? And I'm like, holy shit. That was my first customer service person. And then it was just essentially like that the whole time. Like serious faced people, confirmed by the tour guides. Like the tour guides were like, yeah, that's just kind of how like we do things.
Interesting.
So whatever.
Interesting.
It just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm spoiled in Thailand. Okay. So that's number one. Second
Okay.
thing that was fascinating. Now, I guess this is maybe my third caveat of all my caveats. The only two local people that I talked to extensively were the tour guides. So I have no idea if these guys are representative. I interacted with other local people, but didn't get a chance to meet them or hang out. So this is all coming from the tour guides, what they talked about on the tour, and then in my discussions with them.
Okay.
So here's something else that's fascinating. These guys like openly talked about money in a way that like even Thais don't do it. And I don't know. And again, I know there's cliches about the Chinese being business and money oriented, but damn, it really seemed apparent. Like on the tour, like, which is to me is not normal on a tourist tour. They're like, those condos start at like 5 million Hong Kong dollars. This is this. This area is only for rich people. Like it was just kind of fascinating that there was just open discussion of money, who has money, and who lives where. I don't know. It kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. It's like, when I'm a tourist on a tour, I want to hear history and interesting facts. Like, could you imagine taking someone like, okay, like you were just talking about Pim and Stephanie. Like, can you imagine walking around Bangkok and instead of taking them to Talat Nori, you're like, okay, the condos over here are this much, the kind of whatever. It was like the tour guides spent half their time talking about money.
Yeah, that's kind of probably a bit off-putting, but I mean, Hong Kong is one of like four major financial nerve centers of the entire planet. So
No, it
maybe
is.
that's like
It is.
infused, drilled down into the culture kind of thing.
Well, I got the impression. I mean, this is a related topic, and this is what I got from. So on the last day, it was kind of cool. I had about an hour just hanging out with one of the tour guides while my kids were running around a mall, um, and so it was a little bit more buddy talk.
Right.
And man, he was complaining about Hong Kong is an expensive place to live. There's a lot of wealth there. But man, if you're not rich, it is a rough city. Like the vibe I got from him is that it's kind of like Manhattan. So it's not like Bangkok. Like we've talked many times about how it's not that hard to live in Bangkok if you're making 30 or 40,000 baht a month.
Right.
I'm not saying you're going to have a great life, but you can make it.
Yeah.
On
Have done it.
30, 40,000. Yeah, you've done it. But man, so this poor tour guide, he was just saying like, how rough it is. Like it's not. I don't think they have as many options for middle class people or whatever you want to call working class people, and maybe that was why they were talking about money so much. I don't know. So there was open discussion of money and social status in a way that. To me, it wasn't appropriate on like a tour.
Interesting. Well, that also is something it has in common with Vancouver, because Vancouver is so, comically, preposterously expensive that.
Oh, it is. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, dude, it's one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's a real problem there, and there's like, I've got friends and family that live there, and it is an issue. It is something that everyone is concerned about. Not only rent, but then you've got groceries and transport and things like that. Like it's New York in style expensive. So it's like the middle class has been eliminated there. There's a huge population of homeless, and drug addiction is a big problem. And of course, the weather is quite mild in Vancouver, so a lot of people go there. So If you're rich, Vancouver's a good city to live. But if you're not, it can probably be pretty bad.
I mean, that was my vibe, again, 2.5 days. And I'm sure listeners out there, there's some Hong Kong experts out there. So I'm sure there's a way to live in Hong Kong without a lot of money. But I was just a little bit surprised at how much money was just talked about among these two Hong Kong tour guides.
Interesting.
And then, so no smile, open discussion of money. And then the third thing that kind of blew me away, and this has two sides to the coin. Maybe I'll do the positive first. There's obviously great food in Hong Kong. There's kind of international restaurants everywhere, with of course like a leaning towards Asian food, of course, but tons of Korean and Japanese food, and then of course Western restaurants as well. So that's good. So I got the impression Hong Kong has great food. So not a big surprise. But oh my God. On our tour, several of our meals were at Hong Kong restaurants, like apparently famous Hong Kong restaurants. We're eating local Hong Kong food. And I'm just going to say this. I'm just trying to keep it real. It's the worst local cuisine I've ever had in my entire life.
Really?
It's the most bland food. And basically all my students agreed. It's like, I'm vegetarian, so I order, noodles, and they literally bring a bowl of water and noodles, and there's nothing else in there. Like there's no vegetables, there's no spices, there's no onion, there's no ginger, and on the table there's no condiments. They bring my students like a plate, with 10 slices of pork, and that's it. Like the food is shockingly plain. It's literally as plain as you can be, and you would think, okay. So the food is plain. So it's a blank palette. It's a blank slate, and then you can add all these spices to it. There's no condiments on the table. Zero condiments. There's no chili. There's no salt. There's literally no salt and sugar on the table. You can ask for it, but it's the most bland food. And the Thai word for bland is I'm going to mispronounce it, but jut, something like jut.
Jut, yeah.
And my students were just saying, I was joking with my students about like, because I kept hearing them say like, jut mahak. Like, but again, like I said, you then walk across the street to a Korean barbecue and my students were like in heaven.
Right. So
listeners out there, just correct me if I missed something. I mean, it's not bad in the sense like the food wasn't like low quality. It's just it seemed to be to me it seemed on the other spectrum of Thai food, where I feel like Thai people are kind of obsessed with. I want every bite to be like sweet, spicy, sour, acidic. Like it's just overwhelming flavor. And my take on Hong Kong food is that it's the blandest food I've ever had in my life.
That's so funny, man. Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. And on my trips to Hong Kong, I remember having good food. Again, it was a long time ago, so I can't remember exactly what it was. But it's funny, when I think of Chinese food, what I think about is a small bowl of plain white rice with a bony piece of chicken on top with very little meat on it. That's the image that pops into my head.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just plain.
Yeah.
It's just very, very plain and straightforward.
And maybe I've just had bad luck, or I haven't put the right effort into finding it. But
no, that's it.
I find Hong Kong food incredibly basic, and there's nothing to write home about it.
Okay, thank you. Now, again, walk across the street, and there's a lot of international food there, and so I think it's a good eating city. It's just a little bit odd that the local cuisine itself is just not that interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, my next point, which I found very surprising, and this is not a pro or con, it's just an odd thing. And again, small sample of 2 tour guides. They were both openly anti-Chinese, anti-mainland, and they brought stuff up. So it's not like me or my students asked any questions about politics. They brought stuff up. And regularly, like my students commented to me about it.
Really?
Like, and I know, obviously a little bit about Hong Kong's history. I know that the British gave up control of the island in 97, 98, or 99. I can't remember. 99. And then now I think it's, so it's officially part of China, but I think they have like a 50-year intermediate period where they have the, one country, 2 systems. So Hong Kong is supposed to still have its own like local democracy, but I think China has stepped on that a lot. So they're kind of still supposed to be in control, but I think they have a lot less control than they thought they would have.
Right.
But I didn't know. I didn't realize. And again, it's just 2 guys. But man, were they anti-Chinese? I mean, they said stuff like, they're talking to my students. This is a tour. And they would, they said stuff like, hey, so how many of you guys like speak Mandarin? And then like 3 of my students like raised their hand, and then the tour guide says, don't speak it while you're here.
And they laugh, and then they're like, I'm serious. Don't.
No, they said don't speak Mandarin. And I mean, I don't really want to say all the different stuff they said. I mean, they weren't, I don't want to exaggerate. They weren't like vile or like super harsh, but they did say stuff like, we don't like Chinese people here. Like they just said that.
Interesting. Yeah, I just checked. It was 97 and the handover was. But China to visit as a country is very low on my list. I've met lots of Chinese people. I used to work with a lot of Chinese people. I have some Chinese friends like from the mainland, and they're all very nice and cool people. And I understand that the Chinese people are not the Chinese government. But I've read a lot about it, and I'm not on board with a lot of it. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So my enthusiasm for visiting mainland China is probably quite low.
Right.
And I see that Hong Kong is sort of slowly being sort of like blob-like absorbed into the main body of the country.
In the end, I found it kind of sad. And when I had my sit down with one of the tour guides at the end, it was kind of sad. Like he basically said, I either have to leave or just eat it, just like accept it. So, right. I mean, obviously a lot of Hong Kong people have left. I think the British offered them citizenship, right? I think if you were a proper resident of Hong Kong, like someone who's born there, I think you can leave and become a British citizen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So a lot of them left for Vancouver. Actually, that's why the slang term for Vancouver in Canada is Honcouver.
Oh, funny. I kind of knew this already, but it became more apparent being there and hanging out with these tour guides, is that clearly Hong Kong people, they have their own identity. I mean, they are Chinese, like ethnically, whatever. But the experience of being the British rule there, they clearly have their own identity. They speak Cantonese, not Mandarin, even though most Chinese people speak Mandarin. But I just did not expect the open anti-Chinese thing that they bring up. Politics is a faux pas. Like, you're not supposed to bring up politics with strangers. Like, on a tour guide, people don't want to hear about politics.
The next one, he's like, so what religion is everyone? Damn.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So that's not really a pro or con, or I guess in a way I would say it's sad for local people there. And I did get that vibe. The other thing that was interesting, which the tour guides actually talked about, is, damn, there was a lot of superstitious stuff. Like, I know people like to say, like, oh, Thailand's a very superstitious country. Damn. Like, the people in Hong Kong, like, I probably would have guessed incorrectly. I would have guessed this. I would have said, well, Hong Kong's had much more of a Western influence than the rest of China, British colony for a long time, or whatever you want to call it, or under British rule for a long time. They're probably going to be like, they're also business oriented. It's a financial center. They're very well educated. So this is going to be like way more rational than mainland China. That's probably what I would have guessed. Okay. But I would have been wrong. Oh. I would have been wrong. It's like the tour guide constantly talked about superstitious stuff, and constantly talked about how superstitious Hong Kong people are. So it was kind of fascinating. Like it was a big part of their patter and conversation. Like, as we went from here to here, like in between talking about how expensive certain condos were, he would talk about, like, for good luck, do this. To get the blessing of this thing, do this.
Oh, interesting.
It was constant, and he talked about feng shui, like just constant discussion of superstitious stuff.
You don't see that here, do you? I mean, it's mentioned and it's very common, but it's not something that you hear about all the time in everyday conversation.
I don't think a tour guide would bring it up or talk about it. I don't know. I'm not saying Hong Kongers are more superstitious than Thais. It's just something that, I don't know. I know, like, the Chinese in general have a reputation of being superstitious. I just would have thought Hong Kong might have been the exception. It's a little bit more westernized. It's more westernized, more educated. But no, that is not true.
Interesting. All right. That's cool.
The other thing I noticed, and this is particular to me, is for a tourist-driven city, there's not a lot of vegetarian food there. And when we were at the proper Chinese restaurants, they were practically anti-vegetarian, which to me, okay, whatever, I get it. Most people eat meat, but come on, like it's 2024. Like, it's not like vegetarianism is something unheard of.
Okay.
And like when we were at these proper local restaurants, and I'm like, can I see your vegetarian menu? It's just like they acted like, oh shit, what? Like, what are you talking? Like, it's like I felt like they hadn't encountered a vegetarian before.
So they pull out like a book from under the counter and be like, blow the dust off of it. And
I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, this is like, we're on a tour. Like, obviously tourists come to your place. Like, come on. It's like, and they're just acting like, oh Jesus,
and one of these
we got to do this. Like, we got to make. It's like, it's like when, it's almost like, I don't know what the analogy would be. It's kind of like, a group of my students made a documentary film about being wheelchair bound in Bangkok, and they spent a day in a wheelchair, and it was then they videotaped it.
Interesting.
And it was kind of like they're trying to get on like a bus, and like, and then like the bus doors open and the driver like sees someone in a wheelchair, and you could just tell the bus driver's like, oh Jesus, and then they have like three staff people come over, and it's like a whole process of like putting the ramp down, and you can just tell they're like, oh Jesus, like we got to do this, but damn, and like that's how I felt. Like, they're just like, I'm vegetarian. They're like, oh God, Jesus, here we like another one of these guys, like after, and I'm like, come on. It's like not, it's like, I don't know. So that's just my, I doubt we have any veggie people amongst our listeners, but Bangkok is way more vegetarian friendly. It's like, I never get that kind of vibe in Thailand. Like, I never, never do I get the vibe that they're not ready for me. Like, that they've never heard the question before.
Right. Okay. That's funny.
Like, at these places, it's just like, they're like, what? You want what? You don't want pork?
He must
You know,
he must mean
come on.
a little bit of meat. So throw some chicken on the plate. Like no one, only an
That's right.
insane person would want only vegetables.
That's right. And my last take is this. I'm curious what you think about this. I was walking along the street, and Hong Kong looks and feels to me like New York or Chicago. It just feels Western, but Singapore does not. Singapore is modern,
Okay, yeah.
but it's like too clean. It doesn't remind me of Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 5 years, but Hong Kong has more of a lived-in vibe. And I've personally never been to London, but I don't know. Like just walk around London streets. Obviously, there's Chinese on the signs, but other than that, I'm like, holy shit, this could be Chicago.
Interesting. Okay, I've never been.
Just the sidewalks, the streets, and I'm assuming this is the British influence. It looks and feels Western.
Okay, interesting.
But Singapore and Tokyo, they look and feel modern,
I get it.
but not Western.
That's a good one. Yeah, Tokyo's been there a long time. Hong Kong's been there a long time. Singapore is probably the newest one, but I mean, Singapore's got more of a design to it, right? Like Tokyo and Hong Kong
for sure.
sort of existed and then were built up around what existed, whereas
Singapore
was like, let's
feels
design
like
the city first and then build it.
Yeah, Singapore feels like Apple's campus or something.
It's Apple City, basically.
That's right. I don't know. It's just clearly it's Asian, but the feeling and the way it operates is Western, which it's just obviously got to be the British influence.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned quickly earlier before we were recording about how you sort of were, maybe scam might be the wrong word, but pressured into a situation to buy stuff. And I had a very similar situation when I was there. I took a bus tour when I was there years ago with my then girlfriend, now wife. And we were basically locked in a gift shop and said, you can come out when you buy something and when the bus is ready to go. Then you said something similar happened to you?
Not quite. I was, it's funny. Like I was actually kind of a last minute replacement on this tour. And so I just kind of showed up, and it turns out that in order to keep the price down on the tour, my university signed up for this tour where it did involve going to a couple jewelry shops with the understanding that no one had to buy anything. So we didn't actually have to buy anything, but we actually had to go to the gift shops.
Okay.
And something I didn't know about ahead of time. Otherwise, I might have had a problem with it. It turned out not to be that bad, but it just reminded me the tourism industry is just filled with a lot of scammy shit. And it just reminded me of this, like having to go there to the jewelry shop, listen to them give their spiel, and then we say thanks, but no thanks, and we walk out.
Yeah.
It's just one of the reasons the tours was so cheap. But yeah, it's just the whole tourism industry is not the whole thing, but I mean, like, scamminess is part of the tourism industry. And that's why we need people like Stuart from Travelfish, like people who know how to do tourism properly.
Interesting.
And this is why, and listeners, this is why you have to be an educated tourist. Because if you just show up, then you're going to be the victim of the scamminess.
Well, it sounds like part of it is almost like a $0 tour, right? Which is something that they cracked down on Thailand with Chinese companies who basically sold the tour at cost. So it was super cheap. But when they got to Thailand, they put the tourists and people in their groups through really high pressure sales tactics so they could make up the money with buying trinkets and souvenirs.
Understood.
And things like that.
Yeah. So this was not no. If we experienced really high pressure sales, I would have blown my lid. So it wasn't like that. It wasn't that bad.
Okay.
And it was just 2 stops in 2.5 days, and 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. So I wish it wasn't there at all. And I do think it was somewhat scammy. But then when I talked to my supervisor, they were like, it just made the tour like way cheaper. If we agree to do that, if you agree to walk in, with like 20 people, it just cuts the cost of the whole thing.
Interesting.
And then, I told my students, like, don't buy anything, and they didn't buy any, and then they didn't buy anything. But it did just remind me of the scamminess of the tourism industry. That's why the world needs people like our friends who are true experts in tourism, whether it's like Dan or Scott or Trevor. Like, that's why the world needs dudes like that,
right?
To do tourism right.
I'm down. Well, it's interesting, man. I really want to go back and take my son because I think he'd like it, and it's an interesting city too because there's lots of hills and Bangkok has none.
For sure.
So
yeah, no, I mean, so I know my review sounds kind of negative. There was never a time there that I felt like, hey, I'd rather live here than Bangkok. Never. Like, I never felt that. But at the same time, I was only there for 2.5 days. But I would love to go back there and explore it more on my own and take more pictures, man. It's funny. I don't even want to say beautiful. It's interesting. It's visually interesting, right, is the best way to put it. I mean, it has dirt and grime and office towers, which I wouldn't call beautiful, but it's just visually cool.
I see.
It might be the coolest looking city. I mean, other than maybe like if you go to some super traditional place like Kyoto,
right?
Kyoto's just like, looks 1,000 years old. I think it is 1,000 years old. But Hong Kong, like you said, it's like something out of Blade Runner, right, and it's got upscale, downscale. It's got the mountains. It's got the sea. So for taking pictures, for me, it's like, just in my experience, it's number one.
Cool, man. Well, you've piqued my interest again. I got to go back. But yeah, I think we can agree. We're glad that we live in Bangkok.
Heck yeah. That's the conclusion. I'm glad I'm here.
Which is why the podcast exists.
Heck yeah.
All right. We ask our listeners to send us a voicemail using the little microphone button on our website if they have something to say. And this week we heard from our pal, the tattoo master himself, Vinny. Now, Vinny heard last week's bonus show, which is, if you haven't heard it, is just me reading a short poem, true story. And it was inspired to send his own poem. So let's get a little bit of culture and have a listen to a short poem that Vinny sent in.
Hey, Greg and Ed. This is Vinny from New Jersey. I just wanted to say I enjoyed the poetry reading on the last bonus episode, so I thought I'd share one of mine. This one's called Seeds. I have 3 flowers in a pot. One need only look briefly on the pot to see that it is weathered and worn. The roots of these particular flowers are hard-bitten and may break through the pot itself. I never wanted to be a gardener, but we all are in one way or another. No other pot will do. These flowers are the most beautiful beings I've seen, and if they break the pot, it would be a worthy sacrifice. Soon I will have to let them continue to grow outside in the elements, the rain, the snow, darkness, light, cold, and heat. I hope they tap into the earth. I believe they will tap into the earth. I will never take her name in vain and presume to understand her plan. My heart says she loves them as much as I do. The roots of these particular flowers are hard-bitten. I never knew that I wanted to be a gardener. We all are in one way or another. Thanks, guys.
Wow, that was kind of nice. Bangkok Podcast gets some culture, man.
Yeah, I liked it. Very good job, Vinny. And I got to say, though, don't send in poems all the time and expect us to turn into the Bangkok Poetry Slam podcast.
Bangkok Poem Cast.
That's right. But I got to say, man, like I did get some feedback on the bonus show where I did read one of my favorite poems. And some of it was like, yeah, I didn't listen to that. But I got more people saying they really, really enjoyed it. And a few people wrote in and said,
cool.
Great work on the sound editing, because I added some sound effects and stuff. But I've always really liked poetry, especially Japanese haiku poetry for some reason. So it's nice to, expand your horizons, spread your wings, what have you.
Get some culture.
That's right. We're just like 2 little buckets of yogurt sitting here full of culture. Thanks, Vinny.
Alrighty, a final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website that will feature on the show. Hit me up on Threads at BKK Greg. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy out there. We'll see you back here next week.
For sure.